hello, Earthlings, and welcome along to yet another Still Alive, which, well, I'm happy to say we are. So, that's a good start. We just got to get to the end now, Ronnie. So
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
yeah.
So hopefully we'll be still alive in 3 or 4 hours' time, however long.
Yeah, in an hour's time, we can regard that as an achievement at the end of the show.
I think so. We've got through another show. Whether the audience will get through another show, of course, is another.
I know. Yeah. We kind of like don't make it easy on ourselves in that sense. So,
no.
So you replied to this one saying spotted your Louise at that.
Yes, she took part in the dairy farm occupation on Friday, and it was interesting because as they're all walking down to the farm, the farmer shut the gate, you see, and of course all the animal rising people were able to climb over the gate except for Louise.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Did they throw it over, or did they pass it over the wheelchair then?
What they did was she was able with their help to crawl under the gates. Because thankfully it wasn't sort of right down on the ground. There was a space. She was able to crawl up under the gate, and they put the wheelchair over the top, so she was still able to. She thought that her part in it had been foiled, but she was still able to. She was still able to take part with a bit of kind of limbo dancing type. Well, her own version, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I think they were there for about 5 hours, and it did generate really quite a lot of publicity. And of course, it would probably kind of leading on from that. I can, give a little plug for our next show. Our next show isn't going to be on Tuesday; it's going to be on next Monday. So, our regular viewers and listeners, bear that in mind. Same time, but next Monday, and we're going to be talking with a couple of people from Animal Rising, because if you remember, I think it was a couple of shows ago. We talked about Animal Rising's tactics and their messaging, their claims making, and although we had a lot of positive things to say about Animal Rising, we were concerned about certain aspects, especially of the statements they make. And so a couple of them are going to come on, a special edition of the show. A couple of them are going to come on, and we're going to have a chat to them about it. So that should be I think that's going to be a really interesting show, and that's same time, but next Monday, not Tuesday. So if you all make a note of that, and hopefully we'll get lots of people in the live stream.
Yeah, I think they're going to come on. So what's it got to do with you, Ronnie Lee?
Yeah, they might say, yeah, you old bugger poking your nose into our affairs.
Yeah, what's it got to do with
people,
you, mate? What's the matter with you? No, they're not going to say that. They're not going to say that, and hopefully it'll be I'm sure it's going to be a very positive discussion. Yeah, well, Graham's excited about Monday, so that's good. So we've pleased somebody already. I've actually learnt what Graham's group is called now: Vegan Education Group and Action Network. I think that's right. Correct me if I'm wrong, Graham. If I'm,
it's another acronym. It's like VEGO, isn't it? Vegan Education on the go.
On the go. I was struggling with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So right. Well, in terms of today, then, Ronnie, this was your suggestion that you wanted. I thought it was something to do with vegans should move around in packs, but it was impact. Not impact.
Yeah, vegans in packs. Yeah. It's all about packs. Yes. Well, I mean, the impact I'm talking about.
Before you go on that, Ronnie, what about this from Deb? Did the police show up? I mean, presumably.
No, they didn't. No. Yes, they did, but they didn't arrest anyone, because in fact, I don't think I don't think the people who occupied the farm actually broke any criminal law, because they didn't get in the way of anyone.
So it's just trespass then.
They did. So it would have only amounted to civil trespass, which isn't really a police matter. And the police kind of turned up. They didn't want to arrest anyone, and I think it went on for 5 hours. And then I think some of the people from Animal Rising were negotiating with the farmer to try and get a calf from him. And that was kind of put on hold because they were all in the middle of a TB testing routine or something, so he said. So I think they're going to go back and talk to him again in, I don't know, a couple of weeks' time or something when that's come to an end. But what luck they'll have in getting a calf, I kind of don't know.
No, it sometimes works, though, doesn't it? But I mean, presumably, because he was limping or injured, or
no, I'm not really a calf that was injured, just a calf, just one of the calves, just to because they were female calves. These are because you see the female calves are separated from the mothers as well. You see, we hear a lot about male calves, and the fact that well, certainly in the UK, they kill 60,000 male dairy calves at the age of 1 or 2 days because, of course, they're not suitable to go in the dairy herd and they don't want to spend money feeding them, etc. It used to be more than that, but now they're keeping more of them alive for a few more months to use as veal. But they all get killed. They're all killed just after a few months. They're all dead after a few months.
Talk us through that again, because I understood that if they were intending for some of the females to then enter the dairy herd, they would be kept with their mothers in the same way.
No, they're not. No. Well, certainly not on this farm. No, what happens is the male calves are separated from the mothers, of course.
But the farmers say that they kept.
Well, it's certainly not on this farm that they'd been separated from their mothers.
You're not telling us that farmers don't tell the truth sometimes.
Now how would a farmer not tell the truth? I mean, it's a bit like he who doesn't hesitate to vivisect won't hesitate to lie. I think was that George Bernard Shaw said that, and it probably is the same. He who doesn't hesitate to farm other animals doesn't hesitate to lie. Perhaps that's a kind of parallel saying. No, certainly on this farm, they'd been separated from their mothers at a very early age and put in these very small kind of enclosure plastic
calf hutches or something.
I think that there were two calves in each of them, or certainly there were two calves in quite a lot of them, so it's a very little space that they had hardly any. That they had these chains hanging down in front of the enclosures for them to kind of bite and lick, and that was their only real source of amusement or interest.
Nice. But do you know their fate, Ronnie? What's their fate? I mean,
they go in the dairy herd. What happens is they're fed on so that humans can steal their mother's milk. They're fed some kind of gruel. They're not there. They don't suckle off the mother. They're fed some kind of gruel. That they have in these. That's fed to them in the enclosures that they're in. And then I suppose when they're old enough to go in the dairy herd, they go in the dairy herd, and then their lifespan is about 6 years.
But I mean, the reason that I'm asking you these questions, because I didn't actually know that. I thought, well, I was kind of taking their word for it, silly me. But one of the claims making of the dairy farmers that they love to say, especially on places like TikTok, is that these dairy cows are not very good mothers. Well, if they've been separated as a child from their mothers, and that they didn't get any socialization from their own mothers.
Yeah, and they don't. If they're separating the calves from the cows, how do they know how good a mother the cow is? Because the cow's not being given a chance to be a mother, is she?
That's a point on its own. But then again, the next generation then is not going to be socialized.
No, they're not. No. They're not going to learn, how to be a mother, are they? So the whole thing's complete. Just,
the whole father told me that the replacements is supplemented with some of the mother's.
Yeah, and maybe there's some of the mother's milk in, but of course, they want the majority of the mother's milk for the human, don't they? And that's why. That's why that's done. It's a bit like honey. It's a bit like when they steal the honey from the bees, they replace it with some kind of sugar stuff, don't they?
Yeah, which is not as good quality.
No, it's not as good, but it's the same thing, isn't it? No.
Yeah, this is a weird one as well, isn't it? Because obviously, again, the farmers will try and make a virtue of this by saying that they can look after the welfare better. They won't get crushed. The babies are taken into a hygienic place, and so therefore, you see, the point is because it's in such an artificial thing. What would normally happen is that the mother would give birth, and then once she's cleaned the calf up and he or she can move, they would move out of a dairy.
Yeah, I think probably animals kind of living in the wild that would be the kind of closest in this country to how cows and calves would behave would be deer, probably, and how they are with their young, because that would kind of be the closest kind of comparison, I suppose.
Yeah. Another human-made problem which we
absolutely, and there's absolutely no moral or rational excuse for any of it.
No. Well, sorry for that rather extended digression. So you were just about telling us what the subject is today, Ronnie.
Yes, impact. Well, by all about impact, it's really I'd say that the problems all other animals face in relation to our species, in relation to humans, is all about the excessive impact that humans have had and continue to have on this planet, both on the animals directly and on their habitat. So it all comes down to excessive human impact, and the solution to it comes down to massively reducing our impact all across the board. And I think really kind of to sort of start off, I kind of need to give a little history of the world. I mean, it's I mean, don't worry, this show isn't going to last longer than.
Yeah, you said you were going to do that. I wasn't sure if you were serious or not.
No. About you see, kind of what happened is, lots and lots of different animals evolved, to inhabit this planet. Lots of different species of animals, and a large number of those, animals are sentient, sentient species. And kind of what's happened over the course of time is like one of those species, talking about the human species, has become a tyrant over all the others. Instead of living in harmony with the other animals and according to the other animals, a fair and just existence, side by side with us on the earth. Our species are sort of, to dominate all the other species and to dominate the earth. To dominate the earth, as I talk about the human Reich. In other words, Reich actually just means empire, but it's got a kind of got a kind of more negative connotation to that, because obviously it's used to refer to the Nazis, and that's really exactly what our species have done. We've, the fundamental problem is one of imperialism. Our species is an imperialist species. We've set up this repressive empire over the other animals, throughout the planet in all sorts of different ways. And I would say that the task of animal liberation is to drive back the human right, and it's to drive back the human right to what I would call pre-invasion boundaries. In other words, to drive back, the occupying forces of the human species to a level when we do live in a fair and just way towards the animals. Because the problem is our species doesn't inhabit the earth. If it was an inhabitation, it would be done in a way that was fair and just to the other animals that share the planet with us. But it's not inhabitation, it's an occupation. It's an occupation that unjustly, massively unjustly infringes on those
Do you think we've ever done it, Ronnie?
That you and I?
No. Do you think humanity has ever treated other animals or even each other?
No, I think probably not. You see, there came a really important time in human evolution, an important moment or an important period, I suppose, and that was the time when humans became able to make choices. Because once you have the ability to make a choice, then you're morally bound to make the most ethical choice, and that's what humans didn't do. We chose to oppress and persecute other animals instead of living in harmony with them, and I think that goes back thousands of years, when humans made that wrongful choice, and everything has kind of come from then, and everything has got worse since then, and there have been certain drivers of the oppression of other animals. I mean, one thing was, like they say that humans, in the early days were hunter gatherers. You see, so why the hunters? Why not just be gatherers? Why be killing these other animals? You see, that's the first thing, and then the next stage of oppression was came with animal farming, came with the so-called domestication or domestication. Is it domestication? Isn't it? That's the the way it's referred. Yeah. Of other animals, where we've kind of enslaved these animals and kept them confined in various ways, controlled them to be used as food, and that was the next stage in the kind of the accelerating repression of other animals, and then another really huge and that was kind of that sort of worked in two ways, because it wasn't just it didn't just involve the oppression of the animals that were farmed. It also involved the oppression of animals living in the wild, of free living beings, because in order to create land for the farm animals to graze on, and to grow crops to be fed to those farm animals, that meant the clearing of wild places, and then that was a form of oppression towards animals that lived in that habitat, and also the killing of a lot of where animals living in the wild were a threat to the animals reared for food. Animals like wolves, for instance, or bears, or well, I mean these days, farmers, a lot of farmers tend to kill any animal that can't be, they don't regard as being able to be used for profit, don't they? And this is why we have the badger cull, for instance. Farmers are, they're all shooting crows and pigeons and whatever, aren't they, all the time? So you kind of had that as well in tandem with it. And the next really serious thing that humans did in relation to accelerating and increasing the oppression of other animals was the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution that enabled, that kind of enabled wholesale pollution and destruction of natural habitats in all sorts of different ways, and also the industrialization of farming. I think it's because of because of the industrial revolution, we have factory farming, for instance. Not that not that extensive farming is really any better than factory farming. I really want to make that clear. These are all forms of oppression of other animals. But you see, that was another thing that added to it. And another factor is human population. We've not kept our population to what would be fair and just in terms of the other animals that share our planet with us. Our population is far in excess of that, and so that's another driver of this repression and persecution and exploitation. And so there's all these different areas where that relate to the oppression of other animals by humans. And what we have to do, we have to look at all those areas, and we have to very, very very, very strongly reduce our impact on other animals in all those areas in which we have an excessive impact on them.
Do you buy into those theories that speciesism, capitalism, and patriarchy developed all at once, in the sense that when we realized that so-called cattle meant profit, and then what happened then was men wanted to hand down their fortunes to their sons in particular, which meant then that they would have to control the sexuality of women in order to know who their sons were. So this kind of theory suggests that.
I think speciesism predates that. I think the idea that the idea within humans that humans are somehow more important than other sentient animals predates capitalism. And well, it isn't confined to capitalism. I mean, we've had societies, that weren't capitalist, where animals were still oppressed. I mean, in the anarchist communes in Spain, before and during the Spanish Civil War, they were butchers. Those people slaughtered animals, and they were anti-capitalist. So it isn't something that's purely confined to capitalism. Capitalism, I think, is an accelerator, is a multiplier of speciesism, or a multiplier of the harm that speciesism does to animals, because of the profit motive, and because it drives production, it drives consumption, and so it multiplies the harm. But it's not the fundamental cause. The fundamental cause is speciesism.
Yeah. Well, you could argue with that, that it was, as it were, the first bedrock of these things. I think Steve Best says that in Total Liberation. But it wasn't long before once we started seeing the value of accumulating capital, and of course we've got that issue that the first bit of capital was so-called cattle, as in heads of cattle.
Yeah, the word comes from that, doesn't it?
Yeah. So there is an interlinking, and what feminists would say, or ecofeminists at least, would talk about a logic of domination, which would tie all these kind of things together in the sense that once we realize that there's some profit to be had, I suppose really in terms of what you've been saying, it seems the overarching thing is that we don't have, in our dealings with each other and other animals and nature, we don't seem to have much humility. And so, as you've said, it's not as though we're talking about going back to something that existed before, some golden age. We're talking about creating something that's never existed before.
Yeah, I mean, this is this is the problem I have, and I mentioned that in our previous show, where animal rights are talking about a broken relationship, that humans, we have to mend a broken relationship with other animals. And when you're talking about that implies
we've got to start an unbroken one first.
That implies that something was okay and then it became broken. I don't believe that was the case. I don't think the relationship of humans with other animals has ever been okay. I just think that it's kind of over time been made worse because of other factors. It's been accelerated. It's been multiplied by other factors. But I think speciesism, from that very time when humans were able to make choices, I think that was when, the wrongful choices were made. And I think speciesism dates back, thousands and thousands of years and hugely predates capitalism, I would say.
Well, one interesting thing, as you were talking, I was thinking about, you use that phrase, hunter gatherers, and a lot of people have adapted that now. They often talk about foragers, but also they reverse the order and say forager hunters to get the kind of quantitative thing kind of right, as it were.
I think that's probably more.
Let me just make this point. A lot of people do say, but where's all the cave paintings of plants, because it's obvious that we were hunter gatherers, because we got all these pictures of human beings amongst other animals, often with what apparently are weapons. But it's interesting to actually look at that. First of all, there are quite a lot of cave paintings of trees and plants. There are quite a lot of them. But also, what Jim Mason would say, this is Unnatural Order, his book, he would say that, of course, other animals fascinated early humanity because of the variety and the fact that they moved around amongst us, whereas plants and that don't. And they were the most active part of nature that we saw. And so in that sense, it's not much of a surprise that they took the eye of the artist, as it were.
No. I mean, I wouldn't deny that, that some animals were hunted by humans, but I think I would say that humans were kind of probably far more foragers and scavengers than hunters, because that's so much easier, isn't it? It's so much easier to kind of
do but that. Ideologically, we can't tolerate the idea that we were scavengers. We can't tolerate that, can we? Because it just doesn't fit our image,
People don't like the idea of that, because I think like people they tend to look down on hyenas, don't they? Because hyenas are kind of mainly scavengers, aren't they? And so and that's why they seem to have got like a bad name. I kind of don't know why, but that's kind of how they tend to be kind of looked at. And I think it's the same thing. But it's so much easier, isn't it, to kind of come across like an animal's being killed maybe by another predatory animal, and to kind of take that for meat rather than go hunting an animal themselves, wasn't it? And I'm sure that happened lots of times.
Yeah, it's just a part of it that people don't like is the idea that we're kind of hiding behind a rock, hoping that the lion leaves something for us.
Yeah, and I think that's what happened a lot. Of course, that's what people going to do. I mean, the animals that humans might have been seeking to hunt would far outpace humans. They'd be much faster, and more agile. So obviously, if you can kind of
scavengers are essential in terms of ecosystems.
Yeah. Oh no, yes. I mean, yes, absolutely, and scavengers aren't just your kind of big animals. A lot of small animals, a lot of insects are scavengers, aren't they, as well? And they're all very important.
Yeah, a lot of capitalists are scavengers, Ronnie. Anyway.
yeah. But I think you can't really. I mean, I'd say animal liberation and capitalism are incompatible, and the reason I say that is kind of actually it's actually kind of not really to do with food. We've seen capitalism moving very heavily in on the the vegan food market, haven't we? Where all these big corporations are now producing products suitable for vegans, aren't they? Alongside their meat and dairy products, and they want the vegan pound now, don't they? So so it's not really in with regard to food. It's to do with regard to the natural world and this destruction of the habitats of other animals where capitalism is a threat. Because you could conceivably have a world where all these the only thing that these corporations produce was food, was plant-based food, was food suitable for vegans, because that's where the profit lay, that's where the money was, and so that's what they do. But the thing is, if they're still operating according to capitalist principles, then if you've still got a world operating according to capitalist principles, what you're going to do is you're going to have overconsumption, because people have to be encouraged to consume in order to continually provide profit for these companies. So you're still going to have overconsumption, and you're still going to have overproduction to satisfy that consumption, and then you're going to have the transport that's associated with that. You're going to have the pollution that's associated with that, and all sorts of stuff that makes a negative impact on the natural world. And that's where capitalism will still continue. So you can't have animal liberation under a capitalist economic system. We need a different sort of economic system.
So if I'm hearing you right, Ronnie, in terms of this concept of impact, are you kind of suggesting, and maybe it's because of the, you know, just stop oil, what's going on, and animal rising and everything. The vegans, in terms of their outlook, need to be a little bit broader and integrate
Yes.
a lot. Yeah, is that what you're saying? Yeah?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's not just about food. I mean, I'd kind of divide sort of, you know, people who consider themselves vegan into roughly into three categories. There are those who think it's just a diet, just about food. That's all it is. It's just about, you know, what you eat. Does this contain animal products or doesn't it? That's end of story, right? There's some like that, and you know, certainly some have been encouraged to be like that. Then you've got a second category who are like, you know, anti-exploitation of other animals. So in other words, they're, you know, they're not going to consume animal products, but then you know, they're not going to go to animal circuses. They're not going to go to the horse racing. They're going to avoid giving money to charities that fund animal experimentation. All these things, you know, there's that category. But they don't consider the harm that's done to other animals by adverse human impact on the natural world. That seems to be outside, you know, what they consider to be the vegan ethic. And then there are those that do consider that consider that we do have a far greater impact on other animals than we should have. And there are those people, you know, and vegans that kind of accept that, will include that within their lifestyle, and will try, as well as avoiding animal products and avoiding all these other forms of exploitation of other animals, they'll also try as best they can to minimize their own impact on the environment. Because you kind of have a situation. I mean, I know vegans that kind of, you know, they'll fly halfway around the world. I mean, you know, flying in an airplane is one of the biggest contributors to the climate crisis, biggest contributors to global warming. I mean, George Monbiot, you know, the very well-known environmentalist, he said the two most important things that any individual person can do to not contribute towards the climate crisis, or to reduce their contribution to the climate crisis, so one, adopt a vegan diet, and two, don't fly. You know, and that, you know, that's kind of what he said. He said, well, everything else, you know, is kind of much less than that. You know, I mean, I'd add a third thing to that, and that would be not have so many children, because, you know, human overpopulation is kind of like, because that's another person.
Both controversial ideas. But first of all, can you confirm that I didn't set you up to say that, Ronnie? You said it under your own steam.
Oh no, I know that my idea is controversial.
Yeah.
Because you know, I think and say things that I think a lot of people haven't thought of, to be quite honest. And you know, but then someone have to say that. You know, I think that, you know, a lot of people, including you know, a lot of vegans, don't fully appreciate the, you know, the extent of the harm that humans have done and continue to do to other animals that share this planet with us.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, and it's interesting because I used to listen to morning radio, you know, like Radio 5 Live or Radio 4 quite a lot. Even though I'm based in Ireland, I tend to listen to the British ones because the Irish ones are not particularly good in terms of their content and stuff, and also full of dairy adverts and stuff. But the other day, I just happened to tune in, first time for weeks, and the first thing I heard was a woman from the travel industry building on some research that had just been done, which is saying that traveling is psychologically beneficial for humans. And so she was talking about what we need to do is building the idea of travel being a human right. And as soon as she said that, I was thinking about you, Ronnie, because I was thinking that you're going to go.
But kind of, you can, but like, yeah, you know, I don't think it kind of does people any good to just remain static. But why not travel on your bike to like a local beauty spot? and
difficult to
enjoy
get
that.
to Spain on a bike, Ronnie.
Yeah, but you don't need to go to Spain, do you? When you've got, we have beautiful places all around us. But people will fly halfway around the world and they'll never go to a local beauty spot that's just a couple of miles down the road. They've never been there. They probably don't even know it exists, as they're kind of, going to New York City or lying on a beach in the Bahamas. They don't know that there was a beautiful place just down the road from them that they could have gone to with massively less expense, massively less stress, and massively less adverse.
Come on, Ronnie. They've got to go abroad just to see what the McDonald's is like over there.
But because a lot of people, they go abroad and they do exactly the same thing as they do here. They want the same food. So what was the point? Might as well have stayed at home. And you get this thing about you'll get kind of posts on Facebook like vegans. Oh, we flew to New York, right? It was marvelous because there was great vegan options on the plane, and when we got to New York, there was these marvelous vegan restaurants there, and you think, well, hang on a minute, but what about the impacts you had on the natural world by flying to New York? We've got vegan. You can have vegan options like anywhere, really, can't you? There's loads of vegan cafes in this country. Why have you had to go to New York? What's that all about? It's just
it's not just for the food, Ronnie.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, but I kind of think, my opinion of traveling to other places is different place. Same species is bollocks, really, isn't it? That's how I kind of look at it. And the only time, to be quite honest, that I've ever I've flown when I was younger. I flew twice to Sweden. I wouldn't now, but I did, and that was in the 80s. Was it in the 80s? But that was to talk to people in Sweden, talk to animal rights people in Sweden, and kind of get them, encourage them to become more active and stuff like that. It wasn't like just to kind of have a holiday.
Well, I don't know if you know, but there's some talk of people coming from Australia to camp out.
Why not kind of organise a camp out in Australia or in their own area of Australia? Why are you coming out all the way here, to kind of sit in a field with thousands of other vegans and or even thousands of other people? I just. To be honest, couldn't you get together with a few vegans in Australia and have a little holiday together or something?
So are you saying really then that we need to, because you were kind of talking about the second lot of vegans you were talking about is the ones that I call animals only vegans, I think. And so are you suggesting that they might just broaden things out
it's not,
in terms of impact, right?
Well, what I'm saying is like they're not even doing all they can for animals, not even considering the full extent of the oppression that humans.
It's not that. I think it's that they don't agree. For example, David, who we're on the panel with, he's written on Instagram, still there, that it's fine for vegans to drive Hummers. That's a vehicle, I think, and also go fly into continental.
Is it consistent with the vegan ethic? Because
it's got nothing to do with veganism.
The thing is, okay, that would depend on how veganism is interpreted, and if you interpret veganism very, very, very strictly of just being about opposition to the exploitation of other animals, if that's how it's interpreted, now I'd argue that it's more than that, but someone just interprets it like that, right? And so therefore it wouldn't. There's a lot of ways in which humans harm other animals that wouldn't include, because there's lots of ways that humans harm other animals that don't amount to exploitation, that don't come within the category of exploitation, but I would say come within the category of oppression. In other words, if I'm driving down the road and there's some animals in the road and I deliberately run them over, I'm not exploiting them. If I don't care and I think, I'm just going to drive straight, I'm not exploiting them, am I? That doesn't come within the category of exploitation. If I clear a woodland to pave it over to create a road or something. I clear a woodland, and therefore all the animals in the woodland perish. I'm not exploiting those animals. I'm just clearing the woodland, and yeah, that's their habitat, and they're going to die. It's not exploitation. There's lots of ways humans have a harmful impact on animals that aren't exploitation. And what I say, so if you're only defining veganism exploitation, that doesn't come within that definition. But I would ask, yeah, okay, you're opposed to the exploitation of other animals, but where does that come from? Why are you opposed to the exploitation of other animals? What's caused you? What's caused you to kind of, to have that opposition? So there's obviously something deeper there. There's a concern. There's a respect. There's a compassion for other animals that's caused that person to be opposed to exploitation. And surely from that deeper place where the opposition to exploitation comes from, surely from that deeper place should also come opposition to the other ways in which animals are harmed by humans. So if it's not within the definition of veganism, it's certainly very, very closely related to it. And it seems to me incongruous that somebody would be opposed to the exploitation of other animals, but not opposed to their oppression, and want to do something about the exploitation, but not want to do something about the oppression. And how does that go together?
Well, it doesn't seem to make sense to me either. I understand what you're saying, but it is a popular view, the animals only view.
But why? But if there's a care, if someone cares enough about other animals to go vegan in terms of like opposition to their exploitation, that person's adopted a vegan diet, and that person's taken great care in that area of their life to not be part of the exploitation of other animals. That person kind of cares so much that they're going to that trouble. Why then would they think it was okay to just like have an impact have an impact on other animals that they don't really
I mean, I agree with you, and if you go back to what I regard as a superior definition, even though it's not actually a definition, it was just an answer that was given in the very early days, 1945, by Donald Watson, and he talked about that the vegan movement was the opposition to the exploitation of sentient life. Now, it's obviously then that sentient life is an important part of that. And so, yeah, you're right. If we do something environmentally that impacts on sentient life, even though it might not come in the definition of exploitation, it's closely related enough for us to be concerned, right?
But you see, I think the thing is that it's kind of obviously by living on the earth, humans are going to have some impact on other animals, are going to have some adverse impact on other animals. I mean, we need shelter, and that shelter is going to be constructed in a place where other animals live or used to live. If we're going to have any form of travel, we're going to be traveling through places that are the homelands of other animals. So we are going to have an impact, and that can't be avoided. But what I would argue is that the impact that we have is far in excess of what is fair and just. You see, it's not about having no impact, because that's not possible. I mean, the only people that would probably, say we should have no impact.
Fair and just, though, would it? Even if it was only small.
Well, the thing is, if you say I think the thing is, if we accept that humans have a place on Earth, that. I mean, all animals have impacts on other animals. Like an elephant walking along might tread on a smaller animal and stuff like that. There's impacts. I mean, there can be positive impacts as well as negative, of course, but there are negative impacts as well. And so, if we accept that there's a place for humans on Earth, that we're an animal that's evolved alongside all the others, and there's a place for us on Earth, then you have to accept with that we're going to have some impact on other animals. Just living, we're going to have some impact. We're going to be growing our food, and that food's going to be grown on land that was previously wilderness. So that's taken that away, as habitat.
I think there'll be
for
a bit of
animals.
pushback from that, Ronnie, in the sense that have we not forfeited our place on the earth because of what we do and the way that we do it?
Well, I mean, there are certainly. I think there are people that would argue that. I think the voluntary human extinction movement would argue that and say that humans should voluntarily become extinct. I mean, how that happens, I don't know, because those people aren't killing themselves. They're not all committing suicide. So, a kind of how they can say, I don't know, but no, but I don't go along with that.
They're probably trying to encourage everybody else to do it first.
Encourage everyone else when everyone else has killed themselves, then they'll kill themselves, and then
they're very polite after you.
Yeah, you know. But the thing is, yes, and I mean, I understand why they've adopted that position, because what we've done to this planet and the other animals on this planet, defies imagination. It's horrendous to the kind of nth degree, isn't it? But you see, I'd say, that what I'd say in response to that is that, we are an animal alongside all the other animals. We've become a tyrant over them, but we don't have to be a tyrant. We don't have to be. That's the path we've chosen, and we could choose another path, and we could choose to right, the wrongs that we've caused, and we could choose to live in a way that is in harmony with the others, so we don't exceed our place. So our existence on the earth and the impact we have on the earth is fair and just in relation to the other animals. Because I think we have evolved alongside the other animals. We do have a place here, but the trouble is we've massively exceeded our place.
Yeah, well, I think that accords with the view of the founders of the movement when they would kind of almost like suggest, well, look, if we can get rid of the exploitation, the use of other animals, then we've got a second challenge about the way that we are still in the world. Yes. We'd obviously give free living beings a hell of a lot of space back, and we'd also do that. But of course, we're into the Reagan thing about what we'll be needing then is, but we have a vegan world, so it's there's going to be a lot more of it. People of goodwill coming together to solve these kind of issues. Right?
I think that's right, and I think the food, the diet is a hugely important aspect of this. Obviously, like veganism is far more than just about food. But the food is a really, really hugely important aspect, because first of all, you've got, the human species slaughters 50,000 animals a second for food. Other animals a second for food.
It's kind of mind-boggling, isn't it, the numbers?
That's absolutely mind-boggling. And we in this country, 8 billion are slaughtered. It's 250 a second to feed people in the UK. I don't know what it is for other countries. Probably for the USA, it's probably more than that, I'd imagine. Other countries, it would be less, like countries maybe in the Far East and stuff, where they're, people whose diets are still predominantly kind of plant-based.
Hey, Ronnie, do you kind of buy into the Eddie Izzard thing, which is kind of like when your numbers get that big, we can't really comprehend them. We can condemn a murderer and a serial killer even more, but once you get into the hundreds, obviously he was a comedian, so he was kind of going, once you get into hundreds and thousands, you're going to go, oh, well done, because we don't know how to respond to the numbers.
Yeah, right? and I think there's kind of, and I think in terms of people's responses, people, if you show people, say, a photo of like a calf, as say from the example of the Animal Rights in Action on Friday, a photograph of one of those calves confined in that small pen, that can have a far more moving effect on someone than quoting like astronomical figures, because that's kind of the way that kind of the human mind works. And so I think in conveying our message, we kind of have to be aware of that. But that is, but in terms of the kind of the biggest way of all that humans oppress other animals, it really is to do with the food industry, because first of all, it's to do with those huge number of animals that are killed, and the vast majority of those animals are actually fishes. Out of the 8 billion animals killed to feed the UK population every year, 7 billion of them, and this is sort of based on research done by Viva. There's 7 billion of them are fishes. because there's lots, when you look at, the very small size of fishes that are killed, like sardines, and then you've got fishes and other sea animals. In other words, like your scampi and your prawns and all of that. These really small animals.
Then got all the ones taken as so-called feed as well for,
and the ones, because and then you've got like fish farming, because I think we're at a stage now where more fish are farmed for food than are caught. It's huge numbers and those farmed fish are fed other fish. Fish are caught. Smaller fish are caught.
Well, it probably has to be that way now, because we're emptying the ocean as though there's no tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And
so a lot of it is to do, but
we're taking fishes out and putting plastic in. I mean, how irrational is that?
And a major cause of putting plastic in is the fishing industry. It's been estimated that about half of the plastic in the ocean comes from the fishing industry in terms of discarded nets and other fishing tackle. So the best way to combat the plastic pollution of the ocean is to actually go vegan and not eat fish. No,
indeed. I want to see if you're interested in this issue here, Ronnie, because I think it's relevant to what you said. Falsificationism, because we actually talked about this before we went on air, about this kind of Steve Best thing about the left are deeply speciesist, just like everybody else, and yet their values should suggest that there's a commonality in there. But if they want to get what they want in terms of impact, they would need then to incorporate our values into theirs and vice versa, right? You'd agree with that, presumably?
Well, the thing is that I kind of I speak to people on the left in their own language. I talk about imperialism. What's happening in terms of the human occupation of the earth is imperialism. We're an imperialistic species. Our empire has extended and has crushed, the same as the British Empire. We invaded other people's countries and enslaved them and persecuted and oppressed them. Exactly the same as what the human species has done to other animals. Exactly, it's imperialism. So if they can relate to imperialism, then, hopefully they'll relate to the imperialism of humans over other animals.
Yeah, well, Best argues that we're not big enough to do it on our own. So this kind of single issue thinking of the animals only kind of contingent of the movement is not going to work. And so therefore we need to make alliances. The ones that we need to make alliances with are the ones who already to some extent share our values, and that's other left-leaning movements. But the problem is they're deeply speciesist. And so we've got to find a way of talking to them so they can get what they want and we can get what we want. But then again, the idea would be that what they want and what we want should be what all of us want.
Yeah, but like if you look at issues, where sort of leftist issues like opposition to racism, opposition to sexism, these are opposition to the oppression and prejudice against other groups of people because they're different. Basically, it's prejudice based on, it's an othering, isn't it? It's a prejudice based on, and that's exactly the same as speciesism. Because these other animals don't look like us, because they have fur, because they have scales, because they behave differently. Therefore, humans regard those other animals as inferior, and they're to be oppressed and to be exploited and to be regarded as less than us. And it's exactly the same mindset as racism and sexism. So that's another way of talking to people on the left, by saying yes, but when it comes to other women, when it comes to people of color, when it comes to people of a different sexuality, when it comes to humans of different abilities, you're like you're like a kind of progressive radical, liberal-minded person. When it comes to other animals, you're a Nazi.
Yeah, well, you see, I think this is why there's a lot of pushback at the moment. It's kind of like, oh, it's not fair. They're asking for our support and we give it. We ask for their support and they refuse it. That's the way it's constructed, right? But it's actually not like that. What it basically is that you're not anti-racist because you want to support people fighting racism. You're anti-racist because you're anti-racist.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I'm anti-racist. I mean,
but what the idea is, well, you know, we're there to support you, but you're not there to support us. But it's not that. It's we're there to support that cause because we believe in it.
Well,
So
I'm anti-racist because I want to be a decent person. I'm anti-sexist because I want to be a decent person.
Yeah, so there's an imbalance. I get that because of the depth of speciesism. Going back to Steve Besson Total Liberation, we do have a problem of the fact that the ones that we, as it were, from the animals only perspective, we give support to, which is actually a misnomer, really. But they're not doing it back, and so they see it as, well, why should I? If we don't get anything back, but it's kind of like the wrong way of looking at it.
Yeah.
We're there in the first place is not to support somebody else. It's because we believe like them in the cause, right?
Well, I mean, you can get it even within issues that relate to other animals. You know, I would support a campaign against hunting. I would support a campaign against animal experimentation, zoos and circuses, even though I know that other people involved in that campaign aren't vegan. And that used to be, I think that is the case probably to small. I mean, that used to be very greatly the case. I mean, because now you get in these campaigns against, you know, these various areas of the oppression of other animals, you know, the majority of people tend to be vegan that are involved in them. But there's still some non-vegans involved in them. I mean, for instance, at you know, there were people involved in Camp Beagle that weren't vegan. I think a lot of people have gone vegan by going to Camp Beagle and rubbing shoulders with vegans that are there.
But the point is, Ronnie, if you go to Camp Beagle, you go as an anti-vivisectionist.
I go as an anti-vivisectionist. I don't go to say, well, I'm going to support you in your non-veganism. You know, and it's the same like way back. You know, when I was involved in hunt sabs, you go back to the sort of 1970s, I was involved in hunt sabs, I was involved in the anti-vivisection movement. Back in those days, the majority of other people involved in those things weren't vegan. And you had anti-vegans, you know, there's people involved, oh, I like my meat. Yeah, we need meat. I like my meat. You know, that's nothing to do with this. You know, I want to save the fox. You've got that kind of attitude. But I'm there to save the fox. I'm there to save the hare or the otter or the mink, whatever. That's what I'm there for, you know. And that doesn't mean that I support that person that isn't a vegan. I'm not there for that. I'm there.
Oh yeah, this reminds me. Camp Beagle today responded to Andy saying that because he was asking for the scope of their remit, as it were, and they said that we're focused on vivisection, particularly vivisection on dogs, because we don't have the funds to campaign against all exploitation.
That isn't. If I give an example, like of you kind of don't need to have the funds to mention these other things in your campaign. How is that?
It's not true. All they got to do is go down to the local village and set up a vegan thing, and then they campaign against all of it. Then,
well, the thing is, you know, I'd say if anyone's doing a stall in support of Camp Beagle, you know, first of all, have literature that's against all animal experimentation, and secondly, have literature promoting veganism. Because if someone comes up to that table because they care about beagles, then at least they care about some animals, and so you've got something there to work on. And so you can then give that person to say, well, it isn't just about beagles, it's about all animals that are subject to experimentation. And it isn't just about animal experiments, it's about the whole way that humans treat other animals. So you're widening the scope of that person's, their kind of knowledge, I suppose, or their concern. And I mean, when Louise and I, we ran a campaign for 13 years against the greyhound racing industry. And we started putting stuff on our website. We had on the first page of our website, we had something very prominent promoting veganism. We said, look, greyhound racing isn't the only way that other animals are oppressed by humans. There are all sorts of other ways. And one of them, including the food industry, and the way to kind of to sort of stand against all these things is to go vegan, and even on our leaflet,
the greyhound thing almost doesn't register on the numbers when you compared it to the food business. So
no, it doesn't. No, it was at the time, and it's less now because a lot of the dog tracks are closed and there are fewer races and fewer dogs bred for racing now. But at one time it was maybe they were killing 10,000 dogs a year. The British dog racing industry was responsible for the killing of 10,000 greyhounds a year, either before or after their so-called racing career. And it's very similar with horse racing. The figures for horse racing are very similar. And that's like kind of every 40 seconds, 10,000, you get 10,000 greyhounds. It was 10,000 greyhounds a year. I think it is around about 10,000 horses a year. That number of animals are killed by the food industry every 40 seconds. And that's the, so that's the kind of scale of the
scale of it. Yeah.
It's not that, obviously, the lives of all those horses that die.
It's interesting, isn't it, how you can put things into compartments, because I remember, there's a picture of Mick Heslin looking at the BUAV tube thing. And of course, one of their big slogans was every 6 seconds, an animal dies in a British laboratory, right? And everybody knew that figure, and everybody was appalled by it, and everybody would be able to quote it and everything. And yet it didn't really sink into a lot of anti-vivisectionists that number was completely divorced by the food side of things.
Oh yes. It's about, because there are fewer animal experiments now than there was then. It's about every 10 seconds now. But every 10 seconds, every 10 seconds, I think it's 2,500 animals are killed by the.
Do you see that, people? That was Ronnie doing maths in his head.
Yeah, because it's 20. I think I said it was 250 a second, didn't I? So 10 seconds that'd be 2,500.
You could see the cogs whirring then.
That's the kind of differential. And if you take animal experiment, the actual differential is like between the number of animals killed by the vivisection industry in the UK and the number of animals consumed by the population of the UK in a year. The differential is 2,000. 2,000 more animals are killed for the food industry here than are killed because of animals. But that doesn't mean that anti-vivisection isn't an important
No, of course
issue.
not. But
of course it is. But that's kind of putting it into kind of and kind of, in a way, that's kind of why I prefer to put my energy in campaigning for veganism. And it's kind of for two reasons. It's, first of all, it's not just to do with the numbers, but it's also to do with if you educate someone to become vegan, they will be opposed to all of it, because veganism isn't just about food. It's about opposition to all exploitation, and I'd say indeed all oppression of other animals. Right? You see, so if you educate someone to become vegan, then they're opposed to all of it. That it includes animal experiments, it includes hunting, it includes
it's kind of cutting
racing.
through everything. I've always thought it's a bit weird. You go, okay, well, we'll spend 30 years closing down this and another 30 years closing down that, whereas veganism kind of does it all at once.
Yeah, and I think the thing is it radically changes a person's view of the world. That's the thing. It radically changes a person's view of the world, or it should do. Like provided that kind of they're educated to regard veganism as far more than just a diet. But people who accept veganism as a philosophy, their worldview radically changes. Their worldview kind of radically flips, right? So it's like kind of everything. It's like kind of. I talked in a previous show we did a while back about this thing called the suprematrix, where there's this kind of, it's like the Matrix, where in the film The Matrix, people lived in a false reality, didn't they? And the kind of, and I see that as a situation where people live in this false reality, where they're oblivious or want to be oblivious to this horrendous underlying horror of the oppression of other animals. You see, but if you become vegan, you kind of realize, the kind of, the veil is drawn away from your eyes, and you see the reality of, the true
Well,
conditions of
ironically,
existence.
that's what's supposed to happen with any social movement. It's supposed to increase your level of critical thinking. But going back to that thing, it doesn't work with the left in relation to speciesism in a way that it should do.
No, but you see, I think it's the same really with the left as with all members of society, that it's kind of all about education, and it's all about constantly promoting the vegan message to everyone, not just to people on the left, but to everyone within society, in whatever way we can, as often as we can, in as many places as we can, all the time, so that more and more people kind of...
People have been waiting for you to say that, Ronnie.
Yeah. I've got it in. Perhaps I got it in a little bit earlier tonight. But yes, so people kind of... I mean, I hesitate to use the word kind of awake because it's used in connection with conspiracy theories, isn't it? But like, you kind of do want to wake them up so they realize, what the reality is of existence on this earth,
Yeah.
And whereas people have lived in this false kind of cozy reality, and kind of it's like not like that. And I think that this is that you kind of have to, our only hope is to get people to make that radical shift, and you don't get that. You don't get that really by kind of thinking that some kind of, this is the problem of welfarism, where they say, oh this welfarism will leads to kind of liberation somehow. Well, kind of how can it? That you need people to radically change their worldview. And they're not going to do that if you promote welfarism. They'll only do that if you
there's lots of kind of sales and pop psychology which argues with all that you've got to give people baby steps and all that. Otherwise,
no,
you see too much and all that kind of stuff.
No, I think what happens is you have to educate people to see the world in a completely different way, and you can only do that by saying it like it is. It's like the emperor's got no clothes. There's this huge emperor in the room with no clothes on, and no one wants to kind of look and see. And you've got to kind of get people to do that, and it's the only way.
That's not a vision that we want to think about.
It's not a pleasant vision.
Now, Ronnie, we've got a couple of announcements to make before we go, but also
yes.
we're over the hour. So I invite you to kind of go back to the concept of impact and maybe make your final statement for all the people.
What I'd say is like we all need to look at, how we can in all sorts of different ways, how we can reduce our impact on other. I'm not talking just about people listening to that. I'm not talking just about vegans. I'm talking about humanity as a whole. There's all these different ways in which we excessively negatively impact on other animals, and although it's not possible to exist on Earth without some impact, we need to accept that our impact is massively excessive, and we need to take measures to hugely reduce that impact in all sorts of ways, and that is in terms of like how many children we have. It's in terms of transportation, limiting our use of cars, trying not to fly, for instance. It's in consumption, because the more we consume, the more impact that has on the natural world. These products have to be produced, that uses natural resources, that's taken from, that impacts on natural habitats, and then you've got the transportation, and that impacts on other animals, both in terms of the emissions and also in terms of direct impact. I mean, 30 million birds are killed by cars on British roads every year, 100,000 foxes, 50,000 badgers, and then there's deer and there's all the others. That's not justifiable. That's not justifiable. And I'm not saying to people like never use your car. I'm not saying to people never travel anywhere. But we kind of have to. These are problems we have to tackle. because that is not acceptable. That's not acceptable.
Is there a danger of your position here sounding very utilitarian, Ronnie?
Well, you see, I think it. I kind of think. I think it is utilitarian. I think it is, and I think that's
it kind of has to be.
And it has to be. You see, I think there's some things that you can kind of talk about pretty much in the absolute, and I think one thing that you can talk about pretty much in the absolute is to do with food, because it kind of is like it kind of really is pretty easy to avoid animal products in food. I mean, we were doing it. We were doing it, or kind of.
Yeah, but it's a lot more difficult to avoid animal deaths in food.
It's a lot more difficult to avoid animal deaths in food. Yeah, and this is the whole issue of crop deaths and animal farming, and stuff like that. You know, if you're talking about that, but that's still an issue. You know, the fact that other animals are killed through, you know, in harvesting, that other animals are killed by, you know, through pesticides and stuff like that in the process of producing our food, that you've got arable farmers shooting other animals and trapping other animals because they think those animals damage their crops and all that. That is still an issue for us. And it's much harder to avoid than avoiding animal products, because, you know.
Well, I'd say that. Well, I'll go back to. I mean, Gary Francione once said that kind of real life, as it were, forces you to make some utilitarian choices. But that doesn't mean that therefore becomes your position.
No, I mean, for instance, and so what you do, you cannot be absolute about that. I mean, you can be absolute really in terms of. You can be pretty absolute in terms of like, and it's all about all doing the best we can, and we can do far better in terms of animal products, because it's kind of like, you know, it is relatively easy to avoid animal products in food. We might slip up occasionally, but it's relatively easy. I mean, these days, I remember going back to the early 1970s when I first became vegan. On most products, the ingredients weren't listed. There was no compulsion for companies to list ingredients on their food products. So you know, this kind of the joke about you can tell the vegan in the supermarket because that's the person reading all the labels. That didn't apply in those days because there was nothing on the labels to tell you what was in it in most cases. So we had to kind of guess what was in stuff. And you know, quite often we got it wrong. We were eating peanut butter, and then someone wrote to the peanut butter company, and it turned out they'd put beef fat in the peanut butter, you know, which was like unbelievable, isn't it, really? You know, but they had in those days. I mean, in later years, it was replaced with vegetable oil, but you know, that was the case at the time. So, but we still tried our best. We still did our best to, like, you know, people wrote away to these companies, found out what was in things.
Isn't that a dodgy place to be when you're saying we should try our best? It sounds very, very much like possible and practicable.
The trouble is, but there isn't an alternative to that, is there? That is because you can't be, if it's impossible to be perfect, you know, because of the situation you're in.
I know that.
Then really you can't be perfect. So you do your best to, you know.
I understand that, Ronnie, but there's also, if you repeat that too much, or I'm doing my best, it can get very slippy and slidey, can't it?
Well, yes. I mean, I think this, you know, that's you know, obviously that's the difficulty, but there are loads of areas where, you know, human activity harms other animals, where it's impossible to be absolutist in avoiding involvement in those things. It's absolutely impossible. You know, and so all we can do is attempt to minimize that as much as we can, because you see, that's what you have to do, because you can't say, because I can't totally cut this out, therefore it doesn't matter, and like, because I, you know, because in traveling, I can't avoid some impact on other animals, right, in any form of traveling. That means, oh, then that's okay for me to fly around the world 30 times a year, you know, because you can't, you know, it's like, it's not an all or nothing. It's not an all or nothing situation, and it can't be an all or nothing situation.
I do think that we say that we're forced to be utilitarian, but we should move away from that and become absolutists wherever possible.
Well, wherever possible. And I think with food, I think with consuming animal products.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that even if we kind of got the situation where no one is consuming other animals, and so the animal farming thing has gone, our absolution or drive towards it should then be directed at crop deaths and stuff.
Oh yes, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
We can't, as it were, sit on our laurels, because
and I think there's things
the vegan way, is it?
Even now, if we can, there's things we can do to reduce the impact of kind of growing vegetables on animals. For instance, the one thing we do, we get some of our vegetables from an organic box company, and I know that's not perfect. They're probably using animal manure in production of those things, but they won't be using sprays and stuff like that. Now it might be that someone that's really poor might not be able to afford that.
Yeah, Ronnie, what do you think about this idea? Right, when the vegan movement gets a bit bigger, or maybe it's big enough. I mean, if we can fund all these entrepreneurs, and we can fund all these things, why can't we fund the setting up of kind of virtual farms?
Well, I think and other ways of producing food, like George Monbiot's suggestion of bacterial fermentation to produce.
Yeah, because we've got to take the lead on this, surely, right?
Yeah, but we could. Well, I think basically that what you do is create examples that you're hoping that the right sort of administration will then take up.
Yeah, I get that. But the point is, it's almost like we're just waiting for developments rather than.
Well, I think there are. Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's another way. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways in which we convey the vegan message, and we all do it in different ways, and that's good, because we need lots of different approaches, ways of doing it, and part of that are people that are promoting veganic agriculture. There's an organization called the Vegan Organic Network here in the UK, which promotes veganic agriculture, and they've got there's a farm called Tolhurst Farm, which I think is kind of somewhere near Oxford, that is a shining example of how successful veganic agriculture can be, and that's an example of how other farmers could farm their lands.
Yeah, I mean,
without
the use always about scale, isn't it? That's the argument.
Yeah.
Always about scale, isn't it?
So obviously, if other people want to be, if what appeals to people, because we're all good at different things, and different ways of campaigning and different ways of promoting veganism appeal to different people, and so hopefully that will be something that will appeal to more people, and we'll get kind of more veganic farms, and that area of veganism will increase along with everything else, because that's that's very much the way we need to go in terms of food production.
Yeah, I think so, and it's linked to what Joanna's just put up, in the sense that Andy put out this petition asking the manufacturers of cell phones or smartphones to kind of clear up this issue. And the interesting thing about this is that as soon as this went up, this petition, and people started mentioning it on places like TikTok, it meant that although the amount of people going, oh well, you've got cows in your phone and all this kind of rubbish, it's all kind of gone down. But because of this,
Yeah, but it's kind of like, it's like saying, because you can't be 100% perfect, then you can be as shit as you want.
No, it's not that. It's more to do with the fact that the vegan community is seen to be trying to do something about bringing our values into being.
I think. No. What I'm saying is where people are going on about you've got animal products in your phone, that they're kind of, they're sort of saying, therefore that negates everything because you've got animal products.
It seems to be that ends up being not true anyway.
Well, the problem with smartphones, I don't know whether or not there are animal products in smartphones. I mean, where would they be? Maybe the glue's used in them would that contain animal products? I think glue, doesn't contain animal products these days like it used to. In many cases, the problem with smartphones is like the extraction, the mining that's used, the impact on the natural world used to extract the materials used in smartphones.
Yeah,
I think
and
that's
things
a
about
problem
child
for
labour
animals.
too, as well.
Yeah, and all that. You see, so what is an ethical vegan approach to smartphones? You see, because obviously a smartphone is really useful in terms of spreading the vegan message, right? So there's a huge positive aspect to having a smartphone. There's a huge we're doing this show on, we've both got computers, and we, and if not for that, we wouldn't be able to do the show. And I like to think that this show has some positive, some positive influence in kind of, furthering the cause of veganism, furthering the cause of animal liberation. So there's a big plus about these things. There's kind of also a negative in terms of how they're produced. And so what we're looking at is how can I kind of minimize the negative? The way I do it is I never buy any of these products new. I do my very best to avoid, I buy reconditioned products, I buy secondhand ones. And so there isn't the same demand, for the production of them. There isn't the same demand for the mining impact.
I took part in an interview a couple of days ago, and we talked about this kind of the panel that we were on about that we long-term vegan panel that we were on, and I was asked, is there any kind of difference between the generations? And I said, well, one thing is we had a bit more critical view about things like consumerism. For example, everybody I knew used to only get clothes from charity shops, except for underwear. But you'd never kind of buy new clothes, and even with the vegan hoodies and everything, they didn't exist in those days. But I'm not even sure that anybody would go around and get new stuff even in that sense much.
I mean, I still get a lot of stuff from charity shops, myself. I think that's kind of, and that I've had that all my life, really. And yes, because it's I mean, like if you look at something like even a vegan product like cotton, say, right, has in terms of being used for clothes, there's a sea in the kind of I think it's in a part of Asia called the Ural Sea, and that's massively shrunk in size, accompanied with the kind of the mass dying of animals that live there, right? Because of the cotton industry, that surrounds it, and all the water that's needed to grow the cotton, and it's meant that all the water drawn off from
and then on top of that, you've got the dye,
and the dye and all these things. That this dye is often, because what happens is because these things are often produced in like poorer countries, where they kind of haven't got the kind of environmental restrictions that we might have here, which is maybe why they're produced there, because it's cheaper, because they don't have those restrictions, and so you get all this dye going into the rivers and stuff. So even something like that, people go, oh yeah, this is all right to buy this because it's vegan, it's cotton. Well, hang on a minute, you've got to think a little bit more than that. You've got to think of the impact, this huge impact of producing all these things, where people buy things. Often people buy things, don't even wear them. They buy things, they wear them once or twice, new. And so if you want to kind of minimize that impact on other animals, then you've got to think, well, I'm going to get stuff from a charity shop instead of, I mean, I think if you're buying something that's got a go vegan thing on, right? Yeah, okay, you might be buying that new. But then you've got something to balance the harm that it's done, because you're promoting a message that might cause other people to go vegan. You see, you're doing, I mean that it's utilitarianism, isn't it? You're weighing up those things. But if it's just like an ordinary item of clothing, we just go to a charity shop. There's loads of stuff in charity shop that kind of like burst in with clothes, aren't they? A lot of them.
We've done a lot of promotion of utility. Peter Singer will be proud of us.
Yeah, Peter said, but I think that doesn't mean that's not excuse for not being absolute where you can be. You see, and I think one of the areas where you definitely can be, as close as really possible is with food, is with, you know, and kind of when you're promoting veganism, that's kind of what you lead with, really. You can't really, like, you're on the street, you can't like hit everyone with everything. So you think, well, you know, what is the best, you know, how do I lead people, you know, down this road, you know? And obviously the food is like, you know, it's of such major importance in terms of impact. And it's also something that everyone does that contributes to the oppression of other animals, you know, through their diets, you know. And it's also that if someone changes their diet, because it's such a fundamental thing in a person's life, then it's much more likely that they're going to change their whole worldview. So promoting, you know, vegan food, you know, encouraging people, you know, not to consume animal products is like a really important first step, I think.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up to 90 minutes. So do you want to mention the Monday show?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a couple of things to mention. Yeah, you know, first of all, a reminder, it's going to be a great show on Monday. It's a departure from our usual routine in a couple of ways. First of all, it's on Monday rather than Tuesday. So don't go waiting for Tuesday and miss it. It's Monday. It's the same time wherever you are in the world. It's the same time, except it's Monday.
Although we might do something on Tuesday as well.
We
but we're not
might
sure
do
yet.
something on Tuesday.
Yeah.
We still haven't discussed that, but the kind of, and it's like it's like a kind of Still Alive special, because normally Still Alive is just two old codgers, isn't it? Me and Roger that are clinging on to
Speak for
life.
yourself, Ronnie Lee.
Well, I am a slightly older codger than you. I'm older and more codgery than you. I will accept that by a few years, you know. Normally it's the two of us kind of going on like we have tonight. But we've got a couple of guests from, I think we've got Alex and Orla from Animal Rising are going to come on and chat to us in relation to the show we did quite recently, where we had some constructive criticism of mainly of their messaging, although of course we also praised a lot of the good stuff that they do as well. So we're going to have a chat with them about that, and so that should be really interesting, well worth tuning into. And we may do something on Tuesday evening, but we're kind of
there's Graham getting into your type of humour there, Ronnie.
Said old Todger. Well, yeah, an old codger with an old Todger. Yeah, that's me. You know, fairly non-existent Todger actually these days, to be honest. But we won't talk too much about that.
No. And then the next thing we wanted to talk about was we want to give a plug to Andy's channel. Now, yes. Andy is putting up loads of stuff. Now he's got his new equipment, but also there's a lot of enhancements going on, and some of these are very, very relevant to what we've talked about today. I'm just going to scroll up, if only to get rid of Melanie Joy, but there's quite a lot of really interesting stuff. Steve Best, there's a lot of Steve Best here, and so he's talking about total liberation. It's talking about the crisis, the ecological crisis, this kind of stuff. So there's some very important stuff. There's some kind of Francione stuff. It's all been enhanced, so it looks better. But more than anything, it sounds better. And so this is a particularly good place to go. So if you're not familiar with it, you've got to look for this one. It's not your mum, but there's a dot. Not your mum dot. Not your milk. There's a few, confusingly, there's a few with this kind of title. So you got to find this particular one. And then in particular this one as well, which is the director's cut of the new Animal Rights film. Animal Rights, we're getting it wrong. Yeah. So if you're not familiar with that, please go there, subscribe, and because Andy is putting stuff up so regularly, be worth doing that bell thing so you get notifications. I would say.
I think it's incredible how much he's done. It's absolutely mind-boggling that he's done all that. It really is, and that's such a valuable resource. Really important.
Yeah, it is good, and it's kind of putting a lot of valuable things all in one place. Yeah. Now, people are not going to agree with everything. Francione's obviously got a bit of a difficult character for many people, rightly so. There's the there's the open door thing there, that the Vegan Society thing from '76.
Yeah, I mean that's that. You know, people might find that a bit amusing because it's kind of it was made in the '70s and it's very much of its time. People going,
Well,
"Hello, I'm vegan."
Well, I think Ronnie,
Like
in kind of tribute to that, we ought to do a show like that. Kind of, oh, hello, welcome to
Oh, hello,
Still Alive
Roger. How are
with
you?
me and Ronnie Lee. You know,
It's whether we could keep it up, to be quite
I don't
honest.
think we could. I think we'd last
but
about
like it
4
kind
or
of is,
5 minutes, and that'd be it. Yeah.
but like if people are able to kind of look beyond the obviously humorous, you know, aspect of it, you know, what they're saying about veganism is you know, could be said today. It's exactly the same. You know, the reasons for it, the philosophy behind it, everything exactly the same as, you know, as would be said today or should be said today.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's one bit where we were talking about there was Benny Malone has put out some kind of threads where people have shown, you know, absolute ignorance about the way that dairy comes into being. Don't seem to understand the idea of the link between pregnancy and lactation and the notion of drying up and this kind of stuff. And they say that in that film, kind of, cow's milk is car food. It's baby food. It's
Yes.
not meant.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. It's you know, it's the same. You know, yeah, it's all exactly the same. And yeah, that's an important resource. And that was very important for the Vegan Society. And that was aired on television probably in the mid 70s, was it mid 1970s, and it did attract
76. Yeah.
Yeah, it did attract a lot of new members to the Vegan Society. You know, it was you know one of the reasons for the growth of veganism in the 1970s.
Yeah, so it'd be good to get that channel bigger and bigger. So yeah, if you're not aware of it, please go there and subscribe. And like I say, there's a lot going up there almost on a daily basis. So it's worth dinging the bell so you get notifications.
Yeah,
because
it's great that it's all in one place and that people don't have to search all over the place for it, and that it's been enhanced, and that it's because it's preserving a really valuable resource for the movement.
Yeah, we do have, unfortunately, that little bit of prejudice to get by, which is if it doesn't look quite right and it doesn't sound quite right, people are going to scroll away pretty quickly, which is always a kind of problem in that sense. So
yeah, I think that's difficult, but it's something really that kind of I'd like to see that, you know, everyone that's kind of just become vegan, you know, I'd like them to kind of watch a few things on there, to be quite honest, and learn about, because like a load of kind of new vegans, I think, aren't aware of the history of you know, of the movement at all.
Yeah, well, that's one issue. The other issue is the ones who are willfully ignorant of it on purpose because their values don't quite marry with the values of the people who started our movement, and they're the ones that worry me even more than the ones who just don't know.
I mean, I think that's the case, that, you know, people are trying to reinvent veganism as something different to what it really is, and that isn't good.
Yes, indeed. Okay, people. Well, thanks for sticking with us as ever. You're more than kind, and so
and your page is
one day earlier, which presumably, Ronnie, will give us even greater chance to be
still alive.